She lost everything in one courtroom: her marriage, her money, her dignity. At 36, she walked out divorced, unemployed, and betrayed by the same father who pushed her into that marriage. Then her phone buzzed. One text. One initial. From the man she loved 15 years ago. The man her father paid to disappear. And when she meets him, he's no longer broke. He's powerful, dangerous, and he offers her a deal that could destroy everyone who ruined her life. A fake marriage, built on revenge. Stay with me. Because what starts as revenge turns into something that was never supposed to happen. And by the end, she won't just reclaim her life. She'll reclaim her crown. Welcome back, StoryFam. This story is for anyone who's ever been told to shrink. Watch till the end, because you'll have to decide, is this about revenge, or about finally choosing the right love? And before we begin, comment where you're watching from and tell me one word that describes what you'd want most right now: revenge or redemption. Keisha Monroe stood in a courthouse parking lot, rain hammering down like the universe itself was weeping for her stupidity. Mascara streaked down her brown cheeks in rivers of black, mixing with tears she'd sworn she wouldn't cry. Not for him. Not anymore. Her hands trembled as she clutched the divorce papers. Official, stamped, final. 36 years old, unemployed, divorced, and according to the judge who'd just ruled in her ex-husband's favor, entitled to nothing. Not the house where she'd hosted 100 meaningless dinner parties. Not the savings account she didn't even know existed. Not even her dignity, which had apparently been sold off piece by piece over 12 years of playing the perfect corporate wife. Thunder cracked overhead, violent and sudden, making her jump. Her phone buzzed against her palm. Unknown number. She almost didn't look, but something. Instinct, curiosity, or maybe just the reckless abandon of a woman with nothing left to lose, made her glance down at the screen. The message was short, just 7 words that made her heart stop. I heard what happened. Meet me. S. Her breath caught. S. There was only one person who signed messages like that. Only one person who'd ever made her feel like the initial of his name was enough. Like she'd know him anywhere, any time, through any distance. Park Sung-ho. The man she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. The man her father had paid $2,000 to disappear from her life. The man she'd chosen David's world over, and God, what a catastrophic choice that had been. But here's what David Harrison and everyone who'd counted her out had forgotten. Keisha Monroe was her grandmother's granddaughter. And Grandma Lucille hadn't fled Tennessee during Jim Crow with 2 babies on her hip just to raise a quitter. So Keisha stood there in that parking lot, rain-soaked and ruined, and did something either very brave or very stupid. She texted back one word. Coming. 12 years ago, Keisha's life looked nothing like this disaster. 12 years ago, she was a rising corporate attorney fresh out of Harvard Law, top 5% of her class, with a corner office view and a future so bright she needed sunglasses indoors. She'd been the prosecutor everyone talked about, the one who didn't just win cases. She changed lives. Her closing arguments had made seasoned judges tear up. Her cross-examinations were legendary. She was 24 and unstoppable, wearing power suits like armor, and her natural hair like a crown, unapologetic and fierce. Then she met David Harrison at a charity gala her father had dragged her to. David was everything her father had ever wanted for her. Tall, classically handsome in that old money way, with a family name that opened doors and a smile that had probably been practiced in front of mirrors since childhood. He'd approached her by the champagne fountain, confident and smooth. "You're the prosecutor everyone's talking about," he'd said, his blue eyes assessing her in a way that should have felt predatory, but somehow felt flattering. The one who doesn't lose. Keisha had been flirty but guarded, the way young, successful women learn to be. "I don't just win cases, I change lives." Then change mine, David had replied without missing a beat. Have dinner with me. And God help her, she had. One dinner became two, became weekends at his family's estate, became meeting his parents who looked at her like she was exotic and interesting, a diversity win for their social circle. She'd been too young and too flattered to see it for what it was. Her father had been over the moon. James Monroe, who'd worked 3 jobs to send his brilliant daughter to private school, who'd eaten ramen for months so she could eat steak, had beamed with a pride she'd never seen before. Now this is what I call upward mobility, baby girl, he'd said, gripping her shoulders like she'd won the lottery. David Harrison III. His family built half of downtown. You marry him, you're set for life. And Keisha had believed him. Because when you're the daughter of a man who sacrificed everything, who wore himself down to nothing so you could have everything, you listen when he says you've made it. So she quit the law firm, despite her mentor's protests. Became Mrs. Harrison, learned to host dinner parties where she smiled and nodded while men talked over her. Attended benefits where she was introduced as David's wife, instead of by her own name. And slowly, imperceptibly, like a photograph left too long in the sun, she faded. Her vibrant clothes became neutral beiges and safe blacks. Her natural hair, which she'd once worn in gorgeous afros and intricate braids, got straightened every 2 weeks because David preferred it sleek. Her laugh, which had once been loud and unrestrained, became polite and measured. She became invisible, and she hadn't even noticed it happening. The truth came on a Tuesday because apparently life-destroying revelations don't wait for dramatic timing. David was supposedly in Tokyo for business, or so he'd told her over a distracted phone call where she could hear a woman's voice in the background, which he'd dismissed as his assistant. Keisha had been home alone in their mansion, using David's laptop to order groceries because hers was being repaired. That's when the email notification popped up, innocent and devastating. Payment confirmed, Park Avenue apartment, lease renewal. Her hands had started shaking before her brain fully processed what she was seeing. David had always told her they needed to be careful with money, that they should save, that her wanting to donate to legal aid societies was sweet but impractical. Meanwhile, she'd been clipping coupons like her grandmother taught her, buying store-brand everything, wearing the same dresses to events until the seams frayed. The apartment was the first crack in the facade. Then came the flood. Apartment 12C was where his assistant Melissa stayed, the blonde with perfect teeth who always seemed to be working late with David. Apartment 7F belonged to Svetlana, his business partner from Moscow, who apparently needed housing in Manhattan. And then the offshore accounts, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, accounts with balances that made Keisha's vision blur, millions, actual millions, hidden away while she'd been asking if they could afford to fix the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom. She'd called her father with shaking hands, desperate for support, for rage on her behalf, for anything resembling protection. Daddy, I need a lawyer. David's been cheating. He's been hiding money. He's been... Her father's voice had been cold, so cold it froze the words in her throat. I already know. David called me. The betrayal of that moment cut deeper than any of David's affairs. You knew. Her voice had cracked, disbelieving, and you didn't tell me. Baby girl, you think you're the first wife to deal with this. Her father's sigh had been heavy with disappointment, but not in David. In her. You've got a lifestyle. Security. A name that means something. Don't be stupid and throw it away over some wounded pride. That's when Keisha had realized the truth. She'd lost herself so completely that even her own father saw her as an asset to manage, not a daughter to protect. The courtroom had been a massacre. David's legal team was 5 deep. Expensive suits, shark eyes, briefcases that probably cost more than Keisha's first car. Her single attorney, a well-meaning but overwhelmed public defender type she'd found through a friend, had looked like a lamb surrounded by wolves. David's lead counsel had been merciless, a woman in Prada who delivered the killing blows with a smile. Mrs. Harrison contributed no income to the marriage. She has no professional credentials after 12 years outside her field. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. She gets nothing. Keisha's lawyer had tried. God, he'd tried. She sacrificed her career at Mr. Harrison's request. The judge, an older white man with kind eyes that delivered cruel verdicts, had cut him off. A choice she made freely. Without evidence of financial contribution, I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. Mrs. Harrison receives no alimony, no property settlement. Case dismissed. The gavel had come down like a guillotine. Keisha had watched David smirk at his lawyer, watched him shake hands with his team like they'd just won the Super Bowl instead of ruined a woman's life. Her father had been in the back of the courtroom, and when their eyes met, he'd just shaken his head in disappointment. Not at David. At her, for rocking the boat, for not being grateful for the crumbs she'd been given. She'd walked out of that courthouse with nothing. Less than nothing, actually, because now she had the knowledge of exactly how little she'd mattered. And that's when the text had come, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. I heard what happened. Meet me. The Dive Bar on Morrison Street. 9 p.m. Park Sung-ho. The man she'd met in college, when she was still herself. The scholarship kid from Queens who wore thrift store clothes and took the bus, but walked with more confidence than any trust fund baby she'd ever met. The one who'd studied computer science in the library until 3 a.m., surviving on vending machine coffee and pure determination. The one who'd made her laugh until her stomach hurt, who'd argued with her about philosophy and politics and never once talked down to her. The one who'd kissed her in the rain after a late-night study session and made her believe in the kind of love that songs are written about. The one her father had showed up to his dorm room with a check for $2,000 and an ultimatum. Take the money and disappear, or watch every door in this city close in your face. Her father had connections, had made that clear, could make sure Sung-ho never got a job, never got funding, never got anything. And when Sung-ho had called her, voice breaking, begging her to choose them, to choose love over her father's approval, she'd said 4 words that had haunted her for 15 years. Sung-ho, this is for the best. But something in her, the part that still remembered how to fight, the part that was tired of being beaten down, texted back. And now here she was, soaked to the bone, walking into Morrison Street Dive at 9:15 p.m., late because she'd sat in her car for 10 minutes, trying to gather courage. The bar was exactly what it sounded like. Neon signs, sticky floors, the smell of old beer and broken dreams. It should have been depressing. Instead, it felt honest. Real. More real than any of the 5-star restaurants David had taken her to, where every smile was performative and every conversation was networking. And then she saw him. 15 years changes a person. The Sung-ho she'd known had worn thrift store clothes and taken the bus. This Sung-ho wore a Tom Ford suit like it was denim, like expensive fabric was so normal to him now that he didn't even think about it. This Sung-ho had the kind of presence that made everyone in the bar subtly turn toward him, like planets orbiting a sun. This Sung-ho commanded rooms, because apparently he owned them now, or could if he wanted to. He was sitting at the bar, a bottle of whiskey in front of him that definitely didn't belong in this dive. The label was in a language Keisha didn't recognize and probably cost more than her lawyer's retainer. When she walked in, drenched and broken and nothing like the confident girl he'd once known, he turned. Their eyes met. Time stopped. He stood slowly, and Keisha's breath caught because he was beautiful. He'd always been handsome in that unconventional way, sharp cheekbones, intense dark eyes, a mouth that quirked up at one corner when he was amused. But now he was devastating. Success looked good on him, power looked good on him, and the way he was looking at her, like she was still the most important person in any room despite the mascara streaks and the rain-soaked clothes, made her want to cry all over again. "Hello, Keisha." His voice was deeper than she remembered, rough with emotion or maybe just time. You look... She couldn't finish the sentence. Different. Rich? Like everything I gave up, and now I'm realizing what an idiot I was. Rich will do that. A slight smile, not quite reaching his eyes. Sit. You look like you need a drink. He poured her whiskey from his personal bottle, and Keisha took it with shaking hands, downing it in one burning gulp. It was smooth and expensive and wasted on her current state, but she didn't care. How did you know? Her voice came out broken, small. About the divorce. Xiang-Ho leaned back against the bar, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I've kept tabs on you for 15 years, every case David won, every charity gala you attended looking like you wanted to disappear, every time your smile didn't reach your eyes in a photograph. I watched you erase yourself for a man who never deserved you. The confession should have felt creepy. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in over a decade. Then why didn't you? Because you chose him. The words were sharp, cutting. Your father showed up at my dorm with a check and told me I'd ruin your life if I stayed. That I was selfish to hold you back from your potential, and when I called you, begging you to choose us, you said? His jaw tightened. You said, Xiang-Ho, this is for the best. For the best. Keisha whispered the words, tasting their bitterness. Those 4 words kept me up at night for years. Xiang-Ho's eyes were burning now, 15 years of hurt and anger and longing pouring out. They also made me rich. I worked 90-hour weeks, built a tech company from nothing, became the kind of man your father couldn't dismiss, became the kind of man who could walk into any room in this city and be respected, and then I waited. For what? He leaned in, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her dizzy. For you to realize you picked the wrong man. The air between them crackled with 15 years of unresolved longing, of what-ifs and could-have-beens. Keisha's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Xiang-Ho. He slid a folder across the bar, breaking the moment. Business. Of course. What else could this be? I have a proposition. Keisha opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were dossiers, actual, detailed dossiers, on David, his business partners, his lawyers. On her father, bank statements, emails, photographs, evidence of everything and more. These are... She couldn't process what she was seeing. How did you get all this? Your ex-husband's company is leveraged to its teeth. He's been cooking books for years. Your father's been helping him hide assets, funneling money through shell corporations. And his mistresses. They're not just affairs. Melissa is embezzling, funneling money to offshore accounts in her name. Svetlana is blackmailing him. She's got recordings of business deals that would make the SEC salivate. The whole empire is a house of cards waiting for someone to blow on it. Keisha looked up from the papers, hope flickering in her chest for the first time since the courthouse. Why are you showing me this? Xiang-Ho's smile was dangerous, predatory. Because I want to burn it all down, and I want you by my side when I do it. He paused, his eyes locked on hers. Marry me. Keisha choked on the whiskey she'd just sipped. I'm sorry, what? 6 months. Contract marriage. His voice was calm, methodical, like he was proposing a business merger instead of something insane. We make a very public announcement. The scholarship kid and the disgraced trophy wife. Your ex will lose his mind. Your father will lose his composure, and will use that chaos to dismantle everything they built on lies. This is insane. But even as she said it, Keisha felt something stirring in her chest. Not just hope, hunger, the desire for revenge she'd been too beaten down to acknowledge. This is strategy. Xiang-Ho leaned forward. I provide you with financial security, legal representation that actually fights for you, a place to live. We attend every event they attend. Smile for every camera. Make them see us happy, thriving, untouchable. And we watch them crumble, knowing you moved on with the man they said wasn't good enough. And what do you get? His voice dropped, became almost vulnerable. Revenge. Your father ruined the best thing in my life. Your ex-husband got to hold you for 12 years while I watched from afar, building empires and trying to forget the way you laughed. I get to show them both that the poor Korean kid they dismissed now has more money, more power, and the one thing David Harrison never actually had. Your genuine smile. Keisha's hand trembled on her glass. This is just revenge. That's it? Seung-ho reached across the bar, his fingers grazing her hand, the touch electric. Would you believe me if I said yes? Their eyes locked. The attraction was undeniable, terrifying, a live wire sparking between them. I can't think about this. Keisha pulled back, her breath coming too fast. I can't. Seung-ho pulled out a black velvet box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that made Keisha's breath catch. It was stunning. A diamond surrounded by smaller stones, vintage and unique and nothing like the ostentatious rock David had given her. This ring belonged to my grandmother, Seung-ho said softly. She was a comfort woman during the war. She survived hell and taught me that survival is the greatest revenge. She told me to give this to a woman who fights. That's you, Keisha. That's always been you. Tears streamed down Keisha's face as she stared at the ring. If I do this, if I say yes, what happens when 6 months ends? Seung-ho stood, leaving money on the bar. Way too much money, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Then you'll have your power back, your career rebuilt, your revenge served cold, and I'll finally have closure on 15 years of what-ifs. He placed the ring box in front of her, his hand lingering. Think about it. But Keisha, your ex is announcing his engagement to Melissa next week. Primetime interview, playing the victim. So if you want to steal his thunder and his sanity, we have 3 days to plan a wedding. He walked out, and Keisha sat in that dive bar for 2 hours, turning the ring box over in her hands. She thought about her grandmother, who told young Keisha, "Baby, don't get mad. Get even." She thought about David's smirk in the courtroom, her father's disappointed headshake, 12 years of making herself smaller, and she thought about Seung-ho, who'd kept tabs on her for 15 years, who'd built an empire, who was offering her not just revenge but a chance to remember who she'd been before David Harrison made her forget. So she did something either brave or insane. She pulled out her phone and texted one word. Yes. What happened next was a blur of 72 hours that felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. Seung-ho's response came immediately, an address to his penthouse and a time, 8 a.m. tomorrow. When Keisha arrived the next morning, having spent the night in a cheap motel because she literally had nowhere else to go, she was escorted up by a doorman, who treated her like royalty despite her rumpled clothes and yesterday's makeup. The penthouse was everything she'd expected and nothing she'd prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car, and Seung-ho in the kitchen making coffee in a way that suggested this wasn't performative. He actually knew his way around an espresso machine. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "I said I would." People don't always do what they say. He handed her coffee, perfectly made with cream and 1 sugar, the way she'd taken it 15 years ago. The fact that he remembered made her chest tight. They spent the morning in his office, a glass-walled space with a view that made Keisha dizzy. Seung-ho pulled out a drafted press release, and when Keisha read it, she started crying. Former corporate attorney Keisha Monroe announces engagement to tech entrepreneur Park Seung-ho, marking her return to both love and law. She looked up at him. "You want me to go back to law? I want you to remember who you were before David Harrison made you forget." Seung-ho's voice was soft but firm. "I've already called 3 firms. They're fighting to interview you. Your reputation, the one you built before you gave it all up, it's still there. People remember the prosecutor who didn't lose. They want that woman back. Why are you doing this?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Sung Ho moved around the desk, crouching in front of her chair so they were eye level. Because 15 years ago, you were the smartest person in every room. You quoted James Baldwin and Angela Davis. You didn't apologize for taking up space, and watching you dim that light, watching you become this ghost of yourself, it broke something in me I never fixed. Their hands were almost touching across the desk. The tension was unbearable, a rubber band stretched to breaking point. The next day was the shopping trip. Sung Ho had insisted on coming, which Keisha thought was weird until they arrived at a boutique she couldn't have afforded even when she was working. The owner greeted Sung Ho by name, and Keisha realized this was his world now, a world where people knew him, respected him, catered to him. They brought out dresses, each one more beautiful than the last, but they were all safe, elegant, appropriate. The kind of dresses David would have wanted her in. "Too safe," Keisha said, pushing away a beautiful Dior number. "David always wanted me in safe." She walked to a rack the owner had clearly not intended to show her and pulled out a red dress. Not just red. Red. Form-fitting, with a neckline that demanded attention, in a fabric that shimmered like liquid fire. It was bold, it was powerful, it was everything she'd stopped letting herself be. "This," she said, "this is me." The boutique owner hesitated. "That's quite bold for a wedding dress." "It's perfect," Sung Ho interrupted, from where he'd been waiting outside the dressing room. Let her try it. When Keisha emerged in the red dress, Sung Ho stood up so fast his chair scraped. For a long moment he just stared, and Keisha watched his throat work as he swallowed. "That's the Keisha I remember," he said quietly. She twirled, laughing for the first time in what felt like years. Really laughing, the kind that came from her belly. "You sure you want to fake marry this version of me? She doesn't play nice." Sung Ho stepped closer, his eyes intense. "I never wanted the nice version. I wanted the version who threatened to sue our college dean for discrimination, the version who wore her natural hair like a crown and didn't apologize for being brilliant and black and taking up space. That's the woman I fell in love with." The word love hung in the air like a bomb. Both of them froze. "Fell," Sung Ho corrected, clearing his throat. "Past tense." "Right," Keisha said, her voice small. "Past tense." But neither of them moved away from each other. The contract signing was the next day, in his lawyer's office. The lawyer was a sharp woman in her 50s who looked at Keisha with something like sympathy. "This contract stipulates 6-month marriage, renewable by mutual consent. Mr. Park provides housing, legal support, and financial security. Mrs. Monroe..." "Ms. Monroe," Keisha interrupted. "Ms. Monroe agrees to public appearances as needed and maintains discretion regarding the arrangement's nature. There's a standard infidelity clause." "Remove it," Sung Ho said. The lawyer blinked. "Sir, this is standard in contract marriages." "If she wants to see other people, she can." His eyes were locked on Keisha. "I won't stop her." Keisha met his gaze, challenging. "And you?" "I won't." The lawyer coughed uncomfortably. "Shall I continue?" They signed. Keisha's hand shook as she wrote her name next to his. 6 months. Then they'd be done. Then she could move on with her rebuilt life. Except, looking at Sung Ho, at the way he was looking at her signature next to his like it meant something, she wasn't sure either of them believed that anymore. That night, Keisha couldn't sleep. She'd been given the guest room in Sung Ho's penthouse. Huge, luxurious, nothing like the cramped motel rooms she'd been staying in. But it felt strange. Foreign. She walked out to the balcony, needing air, and found Sung Ho already there, staring out at the city lights. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He turned, and in the moonlight he looked younger, vulnerable, more like the boy she'd known than the billionaire he'd become. 15 years I've imagined marrying you. Never thought it would be like this." "Like what?" "Fake." The word sat between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Keisha leaned on the railing, the city sprawling below them like a universe of possibilities. "That night," she started, her voice barely above a whisper, "when my father showed up, when I called you and ended things. You want to know why I really did it?" Sung-ho turned to her fully. "I've wondered for 15 years. Tears fell and Keisha didn't try to stop them. Because you were brilliant and ambitious and I knew you'd succeed with or without me. But if you stayed, my father would have made your life hell. He had connections everywhere. He would have destroyed every opportunity, blocked every door, and I loved you too much to let him take your dreams. So I let you go. I thought I was protecting you, but I just ended up protecting everyone but myself." Sung-ho's face cracked, raw emotion flooding through. "You sacrificed us to save me?" "I chose wrong," Keisha sobbed. "I thought I was being noble, but I was just being scared. And then I married David because my father said I should, and I spent 12 years dying slowly and—" He pulled her into his arms, and they held each other like they were breaking and healing simultaneously. He smelled like home, like every good memory she'd buried, like everything she'd given up. "Tomorrow," he whispered into her hair, "we start erasing every mistake. Together. Promise me something?" Keisha pulled back just enough to see his face. "Anything. If this gets real, if we forget it's fake, promise you'll tell me." Sung-ho cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Keisha, I've been in love with you since we were 21. For me, this was never going to be fake." They stood there, centimeters apart. The kiss hovering between them felt inevitable, necessary, like gravity. But then Sung-ho stepped back. "But I promised you 6 months to find yourself again," he said, voice rough. "So I'll wait, even if it kills me." He walked inside, leaving Keisha on the balcony touching her lips, wondering what she'd gotten herself into and knowing deep down that she was already in too deep to pretend this was just strategy. The wedding was small, but the statement was enormous. They chose the same courthouse where David had taken everything from her just days before. Keisha wore the red dress, her natural hair styled in goddess locks that cascaded down her back, and she glowed. Not with makeup or expensive products, but with something internal, something that had been dormant for 12 years, finally waking up. Sung-ho wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, and when Keisha walked into the courthouse, his eyes never left her face. There were only a handful of guests. His business partner, a couple of close friends, but outside, the media had somehow caught wind. Cameras flashed through the windows. The judge, a different one than before, thankfully, smiled at them. "Do you, Park Sung-ho, take Keisha Monroe to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Sung-ho's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. They were burning with emotion. "I do. I always have." That wasn't in the script. Keisha's breath caught, her heart hammering. "And do you, Keisha Monroe, take Park Sung-ho to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Tears streamed down her face. "I do. You may kiss your bride." The moment suspended. Sung-ho leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, to keep it performative. Cameras went crazy. By the time they walked out hand in hand, headlines were already forming. "Scorned wife marries. Childhood sweetheart, tech billionaire." The story was everything Sung-ho had promised it would be. Dramatic, satisfying, and designed to make David Harrison lose his mind. Their first public appearance as a married couple was at a charity gala. Walking into that ballroom on Sung-ho's arm felt like being reborn. Every head turned, every conversation paused. Whispers followed them like a wake. "Is that Keisha? She looks incredible." "Who's the man? Park Sung-ho? The tech guy? Forbes 30 under 40? Wait, isn't he Korean?" Keisha's jaw tightened at that last whisper, but Sung-ho squeezed her hand. "Let them stare," he whispered. "You're the most stunning woman here, and we both know it." Across the room, David saw them, He was with Melissa, who was wearing jewelry Keisha recognized. Her jewelry, the pieces David had claimed, were lost during the separation. David's face went pale, then red, his composure cracking. He approached with Melissa in tow, plastering on a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Keisha." How unexpected. Keisha's voice was pure ice. "David." "Melissa, congratulations on your engagement. I saw the interview. Very touching how you two fell in love during my marriage." Melissa looked nervous, her eyes darting. "It wasn't like that." "Oh, I know exactly what it was like." Keisha's smile was sharp. "I have bank records, hotel receipts, and a very thorough legal team. Now, speaking of which..." She turned slightly to Sung-ho. "David, you remember Park Sung-ho from college? The scholarship student you called the help at parties?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I don't recall." "You wouldn't." Sung-ho's voice was smooth but dangerous. "Men like you never remember the people you look down on, but they remember you. Funny how life works." David's fake smile was cracking at the edges. "So you're what? Slumming it now, Keisha? Getting back at me with your old charity case?" Sung-ho's body tensed, but Keisha's hand on his chest calmed him. She smiled sweetly at David. "No, David, I'm rectifying an old mistake. See, 15 years ago, I chose money and status over genuine love. I chose a man who looked good on paper over a man who was good to his core, and it cost me everything. But the beautiful thing about rock bottom, you can only go up." She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and started walking away. Over her shoulder, she added, "Enjoy the gala. I hear they're auctioning off golf club memberships. Oh, wait, you might want to check your accounts first. I heard your club fees bounced." David's face was pure rage as Melissa pulled him away. Other guests stared, and Keisha could feel their judgment shifting, their narratives rewriting in real time. As they walked toward the bar, Sung-ho leaned down and whispered, "That was extremely hot." Keisha laughed, surprised. "Was it in the contract that I'd give you a revenge boner? We should renegotiate terms." Their chemistry was undeniable, the fake relationship becoming impossible to distinguish from real with every passing moment. But then Keisha saw him, her father, standing by the bar, staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. He approached, and Keisha steeled herself. "Hello to you too, Daddy." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was low, angry. "I'm living my life." "You married that boy, after everything I did to keep him away from you?" Keisha turned, her voice cold. "You mean after you paid him off and helped my ex-husband hide millions while I clipped coupons? That everything?" Her father's face tightened. "I was protecting your future." "You were protecting your ego." Keisha's voice rose, and people nearby started noticing. She didn't care anymore. "You wanted a rich son-in-law you could brag about at church. You didn't care that he was cheating, that he was stealing, that I was dying inside. As long as you could say, 'My daughter married a Harrison,' nothing else mattered. I worked 3 jobs so you could have opportunities, and I'm grateful." Keisha's voice broke. "I'll be grateful until I die, but Daddy, you taught me to fight for justice for everyone except myself. You taught me my worth was in who I married, not who I was. And I lost 15 years believing you." Her father stood there, tears in his eyes now, pride fighting with guilt. "That boy, Park, he's really a billionaire." Keisha laughed sadly. "That's what you care about? His net worth? I care about you not making another mistake. The mistake was the first marriage. This, marrying the man who sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway, this is the correction." Sung-ho had been watching from a short distance, giving them space but close enough to intervene if needed. Now he approached, his presence calm but commanding. "Mr. Monroe," he said, respectful but firm. "You don't know me well, despite paying me to disappear. But you should know this. I built my company from nothing because Keisha believed I could. She wrote me a letter after you bribed me away. Said she knew I'd change the world. I kept it in my wallet for 15 years. So, no, I'm not here to hurt her. I'm here to spend the rest of my life proving I was worth her belief. Keisha stared at him, shocked. You kept my letter? Her father looked between them, something shifting in his expression. You kept a letter for 15 years? I kept my love for her for 15 years. The letter was just proof I wasn't delusional. James Monroe looked at his daughter, really seeing her happiness for the first time. I owe you an apology I don't know how to give. Start with supporting me, Keisha said softly. Actually supporting me. Not who you want me to be. Who I am. Her father nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging, and walked away. Keisha collapsed into Shung Ho's arms, and he held her. You kept my letter, she whispered again. Want to see it? He pulled out his wallet, and from a carefully protected slot, he unfolded a worn, creased piece of paper. Keisha's handwriting from 15 years ago, slightly faded but still legible. She read aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Shung Ho, if you're reading this, I've already broken both our hearts. But I need you to know you're the most brilliant person I've ever met. This world will try to make you small because of where you came from. Don't let it. Be great. Be everything. They said you couldn't, and when you succeed, know that I always believed. Love, Keisha. Her hands shook as she held this piece of their past. I was trying to set you free. You told me to be great, so I became great. For you, to prove to you and everyone else that love isn't about pedigrees and bank accounts. It's about showing up. I'm here, Keisha. I've always been here. This was supposed to be fake. Shung Ho cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I've been lying to you since the bar. This was never fake for me. I'm done pretending. He kissed her spectacularly. News reports came in waves, each one more damning than the last. Breaking: Harrison Industries under federal investigation for tax fraud. David Harrison III's offshore accounts exposed, millions in hidden assets. Former mistresses come forward with accusations of financial manipulation and coercion. Keisha and Seong Ho watched the news from his office, and she felt empty. I should feel victorious. Why do I just feel hollow? Seong Ho knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. Because revenge doesn't heal, it just clears the path for healing. And my father. He's been cooperative with investigators, testifying against David in exchange for immunity. Seems he finally chose the right side. So what now? Keisha looked at their joined hands. We got our revenge. David's ruined. My father's... I don't even know. The 6 months aren't even half over, and we've already accomplished everything we set out to do. Shung Ho's grip tightened. So let's start healing. Really healing. No more revenge plots. No more fake timelines. Just us, if you want us. I'm scared, Keisha admitted. What if I don't know how to be myself anymore? What if I'm still the woman who lost herself? Then we'll find her together. But Keisha, she's right here. She filed for divorce when it would have been easier to stay. She walked into that courthouse and faced her demons. She wore red to a gala designed to make her feel small. You never lost yourself. You were just forced underground, and now you're erupting. The job offer came 2 weeks later. Keisha sat in the senior partner's office at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious civil rights law firms in the city, trying to process what she was hearing. Ms. Monroe, we'd like to offer you a position, head of our Civil Rights Division. Keisha stared. I've been out of practice for 12 years. And you just helped take down one of the biggest financial fraud cases in state history. You co-wrote the legal brief with Mr. Park's team. Your work was exceptional. Your reputation, the one you built before your marriage, it's still there. We want that woman leading our team. Keisha looked at the contract, then out the window where Seong Ho was pretending not to watch from a coffee shop across the street. He'd insisted on driving her but staying out of the actual meeting, letting this be hers. When do I start? Her first day was everything she'd forgotten she needed. Walking into the office in a power suit, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo, head held high, she felt like herself for the first time in over a decade. A young lawyer, fresh-faced and nervous, approached her. "Ms. Monroe, I'm Sarah. I read about your case. You inspired me to leave my toxic relationship." Keisha was touched, emotional. "You did that. I just showed you it was possible." "Can I ask you something? How did you know it was time to leave?" Keisha thought carefully. "When I realized I was performing my life instead of living it. When I caught myself apologizing for breathing. When I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. That's when I knew." More young lawyers gathered, listening, women of color mostly, who saw themselves in Keisha's story. "But here's what I wish someone had told me," Keisha continued. "Leaving is hard, starting over is terrifying, and you might lose people who you thought would stay. But on the other side of that fear, you get yourself back, and that's worth everything." Applause broke out. Keisha, tearing up, finally felt like she'd come home. 6 months after their courthouse wedding, Keisha and Seung-ho sat in his apartment. Their apartment now, really, with the contract between them on the table. 6 months, Seung-ho said quietly. "Our contract expires today." Keisha's heart pounded. "It does. I've had my lawyer draw up 2 documents. He placed them on the table. One finalizes our divorce, clean and simple. The other is a real marriage certificate. No expiration date, no exit clauses. Just us, figuring it out day by day." Keisha looked at the papers, then at him. "I won't be hurt if you choose the divorce," Seung-ho continued. "You needed time to find yourself, and you have. You're brilliant at your job. You've got your power back. I'll love you either way. But if you choose to stay, know it's because you want to, not because you need to. I want you choosing me from strength, not necessity." Keisha reached for the divorce papers, and Seung-ho's face tightened, preparing for pain. Then she tore them in half. "I have a condition," she said. Hope flickered in his eyes. "Name it." "We renew our vows. A real wedding. Not for cameras or revenge. Just for us. I want to marry you when I'm whole, not broken." Seung-ho's smile was radiant. Done. He kissed her like he'd been drowning and she was air, like they'd been waiting their whole lives for this moment. And maybe they had been. A year later, they stood in a garden ceremony that was everything their first wedding wasn't. Intimate, genuine, surrounded by people who actually cared about them. Both families were there. Her father, looking proud and humbled, and Seung-ho's mother, who'd flown in from Korea and cried the entire ceremony. Keisha wore white this time, a simple, elegant gown. She was radiant, glowing not with makeup but with genuine happiness. Her father walked her down the aisle, tears streaming. "Your grandmother would be so proud," he whispered. "She'd say I took the scenic route. She'd also say the scenic route gives you the best stories." Seung-ho stood at the altar, crying openly with no shame. When Keisha reached him, he took her hands and spoke his vows. 15 years ago, I fell in love with a woman who argued with our economics professor about systemic inequality and won, who wore her culture like armor and her intelligence like a crown. I thought I lost her, but I was wrong. She was just waiting for the world to catch up to her brilliance. Keisha, you're my home, my purpose, my forever. And I promised to spend every day reminding you that you were never too much. The world was just too small. Keisha sobbed, laughed, tried to compose herself. Seung-ho, I spent 12 years being quiet, being palatable, being less so someone else could feel like more. You never asked me to shrink. You just kept holding up mirrors until I saw myself clearly. You loved me when I was lost. But more importantly, you celebrated me when I found myself again. I promise to never lose myself again. And if I do, I promise to let you remind me who I am. I now pronounce you. Wait. Keisha held up a hand, and everyone froze. She turned to the crowd, finding David in the back row. She'd invited him and he'd come, haggard, humbled, but present. "I need to say something," Keisha announced. "I invited my ex-husband today, not to gloat, not for revenge, but because I needed him to see something." She faced David directly. "David, thank you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sung-ho's hand tightened on hers, trusting. "Thank you for cheating. Thank you for showing me that I was settling for a life that looked good on paper but felt like prison. Thank you for taking me to court and leaving me with nothing. Because it forced me to remember I've always been everything. You breaking me was actually you freeing me. So, thank you." David nodded, tears falling, a small sad smile on his face. "You deserved better. I'm sorry I wasn't it. I forgive you. Not for you. For me." She turned back to Seong-ho, who was looking at her like she hung the moon. "Okay, now you can pronounce us." The officiant laughed through tears. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Again. For real this time. The kiss was everything. Applause erupted. Joy was palpable. Healing was happening in real time. 5 years later, Keisha stood in a courtroom delivering a closing argument in a major civil rights case. Her natural hair was styled in an intricate crown of braids. Her power suit was bold red, and her voice commanded the room. In the gallery, Sung-ho sat with their 4-year-old daughter, adopted when she was 6 months old, black and Korean, absolutely perfect, who was trying very hard to be quiet, and mostly succeeding. Keisha won the case. She always did. That afternoon, they went to the park, watching their daughter play. Sung-ho turned to Keisha with a familiar, mischievous smile. "You ready for the next adventure?" "Always." "What are we thinking? Expanding the firm? Another scholarship fund?" He pulled out a tiny pair of sneakers from his bag. "I was thinking something smaller and louder, and likely to ruin our sleep schedule for another 18 years. Keisha's eyes widened. "You're serious? Another adoption?" "We got the call this morning. There's a baby boy, 3 months old. If we want—" "Yes!" Keisha was already crying. "God, yes!" Their daughter ran over, curious about her mother's tears. "Mommy, why you crying?" Keisha scooped her up. "Because you're getting a brother." "Really?" The little girl's excitement was infectious. Sung-ho pulled them both into his arms, this family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances. Later that night, Keisha sat in her home office, looking at the camera for a video her assistant had convinced her to make. Her story had been featured in several magazines, and women kept reaching out, asking how she'd done it, how she'd reclaimed her life. "If you're watching this and you feel lost, hear me," Keisha said to the camera. "You are not your worst decision. You are not the person who diminished you. You are not the years you spent performing instead of living." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "You are every fight you fought to become whole again. You are every morning you woke up and chose yourself. You are the courage it takes to start over when starting over feels impossible. My grandmother used to say, 'Baby girl, your crown has been bought and paid for. All you gotta do is wear it.' I spent years letting other people hold my crown, my father, my ex, society's expectations. But here's what I learned. Your crown isn't something someone can take. It's something you stop defending. So to the woman who thinks it's too late, to the woman who gave up her dreams for someone else's comfort, to the woman who's tired of being small, it's not too late. Your dreams are still waiting, and the right partner, they won't ask you to be small. They'll just hand you taller shoes." She smiled, radiant with the kind of happiness that can only come from hard-won battles and genuine love. "I'm Keisha Park, and I reclaimed my crown. Now go get yours." The camera faded to black, but Keisha's message echoed. In the comments that would come later, women shared their own stories, their own crowns, their own reclamations, because that's what happens when one woman rises. She brings others with her. And Keisha, she was just getting started. If this story touched you, drop a comment below. Tell me about your crown, the one you're wearing or the one you're still claiming. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere, there's a woman sitting in a courthouse parking lot in the rain, holding divorce papers and thinking her life is over. This message is for her. Your life isn't over. It's just beginning. The best revenge is becoming yourself again. And your crown, it's been waiting for you all along.